Right, strap in, buckle up. This could be a long one. I want to share with you today an assorted list in no particular order of simple plant-based diet hacks that my clients are implementing right now to lose 10, 20, 30 pounds or more in 12 or 24 weeks on my Slim and Sustain program. Each of these are things that I've had to apply at various points or maybe consistently in my weight loss journey that brought me great results. So this isn't just stuff I've willy-nilly come up with. I'm not actually, I don't mean to say just, I'm not a YouTuber, right? Primarily, I'm a weight loss coach. That's what I do. So this isn't just stuff that I've seen someone else say and I'm just parroting like some perhaps do without me pointing fingers. Some perhaps do, I think, in all online communities. This is from practicing. This is from helping, nearly 400 vegans and plant-based dieters move towards their ideal healthy body weight. So anyway, enough spiel. I just like to establish my credibility so you know it's not just coming from thin air. This is stuff I'm literally seeing working at the moment with my clients, proven stuff that's bringing really decent results. Step number one is eat potatoes, and there's a lot of furore already in the plant-based community about potatoes anyway, so probably I don't need to emphasize it too much. But rightly so, that furore exists for good reason. 5 ounces of cooked white potato is somewhere in the region of 140, 150 calories approximately. 150 calories for about 5 ounces of potato. For my fellow Europeans, that's about 150 grams. 150 grams of potato, cooked potato, which is about one quite small baking potato, let's say like this, a small baking potato for 150 calories. That is such good bang for your buck in terms of calories. Even if you don't really have any context for caloric density, it's the first time you're kind of thinking at the moment about calories and that sort of thing, so you don't really know what that kind of means or how that ranks. Trust me, that's really good, right? That volume of food in 5 ounces of potato, 150 grams of potato for only about 150 calories or so, that's amazing. So that's why I love, for a lot of my clients, potatoes to be a really, really predominant carb source. I just gave you the numbers for white potatoes there, but sweet potatoes aren't far off. They're really low in caloric density as well, so I highly recommend both of them. And by extension, the whole tuber category, right? Yam's brilliant as well. And we can think of the extended family, technically vegetables, but the likes of butternut squash and that sort of thing, right? Incredible for weight loss, this tuber group. Insane, because they just have an amazing intersection between calorie content and satiation effect. You get so much fullness, so much satisfaction from very few calories. Really, that's a cheat code for weight loss, right? If you can eat low calorie foods and feel full, obviously that's a massive advantage from a weight loss perspective, so long as you're not driving your calories too low. So the first thing I want to emphasize here, if you do enjoy potatoes, good, keep eating them. They're fantastic for weight loss. No, though, at the same time, I do not recommend an exclusively potato diet for many, many reasons, for similar reasons why I do not advocate for a strict mono diet, right? Whether it was the rice diet, whether it was simply eating oatmeal all day long, I don't advocate for that. I like a balance of both the micro and macronutrients in one's diet, so I don't just advocate eating of potatoes. I know that's something radical people like to do, and in this particular community, we've had lots of stories, lots of success stories off the back of potato resets and that sort of thing. People putting the title of potatoes in their weight loss channel names. I'm not all about that, but I do think potatoes are a wonderful food, a wonderful tool, but there are many effective foods for weight loss. But yeah, they are head and shoulders above many other in this whole plant-based category for good reason. So that's tip number one here, potatoes. Lots of them in your diet if you want to stay full whilst maintaining a calorie deficit. Tip number two, portion control. Just eat plants. You can eat as much as you want. You can have seconds if you're doing the 50-50 plate. Have you ever heard anything like this before? It's amazing how many people I run into here online and my clients when they first sign up with me that are under the impression that so long as they're eating whole plant foods, they can eat as much as they like. And it doesn't matter about portions and they will lose weight. It's categorically not true. And look, you might lose your first 5, 10, 15 pounds. If you've got 50 pounds to lose, you might lose that first little bit, that first 10% or so, simply by following this sort of just eat plants mantra of, I'm not going to really worry about portions or sort of the composition of my meals all that much. I'm just going to throw a bunch of whole foods on my plate and see what happens on the scale. You might lose a bit of weight doing that. There are people that have lost 80 pounds doing that. But for most of us, and certainly not to speak condescendingly on this, but brutal reality after helping, this is my job, right? But brutal reality, like if you're over 60 years old Women, this particularly applies to you. Men can typically eat more calories. You ain't gonna get out if you don't do that much exercise. You ain't gonna get away with that. You ain't gonna get away with eating unlimited portions as long as it's whole foods and still losing weight at the same time. For most of you, you are going to have to be more respectful over calories and therefore, by extension, over your portions. So remember, two things can be simultaneously true, right? And I always say this, but I think people they live in binary land where something is either one thing or another, and different sort of contrasting ideas can't coexist and both have different values. But number one, a plant-based diet contains lots of low-calorie foods, so you can still eat generously and lose weight, right? Like I just gave with the potato example. Lots of whole plant foods are so low in caloric density, so high in fiber as well, which compounds this effect. And so you can actually feel really full, eat decent portions, and your calories are actually relatively well. So that's point number one. But point number two, and this is simultaneously true, a plant-based diet still contains some higher calorie foods that you can't eat so liberally. And even the lower calorie foods, if you eat unnecessarily large portions or graze when you're maybe bored or stressed or you want a pick-me-up or something to keep you entertained, you might well overdo the calories, right? So these things all coexist. Plant-based diet can be amazing for weight loss, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that you have a right to eat as much as you want and still feel entitled to that number on the scale, dropping consistently week on week. Versus other nutrition approaches, I have strongly argued that this approach allows one to forget about portions maybe more so than other approaches, or to not have to think or be so. That's not the right phraseology. Let me think about this. What do I want to say here? I argued this plant-based approach compared to many other approaches to weight loss, diets, nutrition, etc., whether it be keto, whether it be flexible diet, so on and so forth. I argued that this whole foods plant-based approach, I've lost it again. What do I want to say? Stick with me, folks. I believe it allows you to not have to be quite so vigilant and strict, that's what I'm trying to say, with your portion sizes. To not have to be quite so caring and give so much attention to the subject of calories versus other nutrition approaches. But remember, two things can coexist. That doesn't mean you can't overdo it. That doesn't mean that you can't overeat and that you'll never eat too many calories, because you might, even if you're eating very cleanly and sort of checking the boxes of the tenets of this whole foods plant-based way of eating. So yes, it's highly effective for weight loss to the extent that 8, 9 out of 10 of my clients within the first week will write to me saying, Ryan, I'm astonished at how much food you've just given me to eat, and I've lost 3.5 pounds, 4 pounds in my first week here, right? I get that message from the vast majority of my clients after the first week. It's not many that are hungry from week 1 in my program. So yeah, clients will tell me all the time, Ryan, I'm amazed at how much food I can eat and still lose weight here. But that's only because I'm planning it for them. That's only because I've done the thinking for them. If they were left to their own devices, would they create kind of the right voluminous, composition of voluminous ingredients that allowed them to achieve that fullness for so few calories? Not that I have my clients under eating, but they're still in a sensible calorie deficit, right, to get that scale moving. That's only because I've made that, right? That's only because I've designed their plan. If you're just copy and pasting from advice you hear in YouTube videos, or it seems that this YouTuber I watched ate about X amount of food, so I'm just going to sort of copy and paste that, and you just kind of do it randomly, or you just eat how much you feel you would like in a given sitting, you might well be in trouble. So I think bottom line here, I've done a lot of spieling, but bottom line is you still need to be mindful of your portion sizes on a plant-based diet. I could have probably said that in 2 minutes or less, right? Instead of taking 4 or 5 minutes to say it like I have here. But you do have to be mindful about your portion sizes. And by the way, this goes both ways, right? So I've been talking to you about this from the frame of kind of like it's possible to overeat and overconsume calories on a plant-based diet. It's also possible to underdo it. And I think, again, with it being a great strength of this approach that so many whole plant foods have a low caloric density, you're thinking exceptions being like nuts and seeds and that sort of thing and dried fruit. But with so many whole plant foods having a very low caloric density and therefore being so effective from a weight loss perspective because of the small calories they contain, the very few calories they contain compared to other foods under other umbrellas, at the same time, that is actually also the risk of undereating. That advantage from a weight loss perspective is also the risk of undereating, right? Because you might eat so many clean, fiber-rich foods that you're getting all this bulk, you're adding all this water to your system, especially if you're eating lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. So are you actually getting that many calories for all the fullness that you're actually feeling bodily, right? So it's also possible to undereat. So when I talk about portion control here, I'm not necessarily talking about eating less food, more just the right amount for you. So a couple of signs that you're under-eating that are worth covering here, because sometimes clients will come to me and they're already under-eating. They've been in a calorie deficit for so long that they're having sort of this they're experiencing almost a metabolic stubbornness because they've been driving the calories down for so long. And once the amount of food they're eating did work for weight loss, but the body's simply adapted and gone, hold on, we know exactly what you're doing here. But they're also crashing and burning and not, then I see clients. So that's the case for some clients in a minority. Then most likely what happens is clients come to me and they're wildly inconsistent. And there's lots of reasons as to why they binge out on the weekend and why every Friday night they might make poor choices, even though they're good sort of Monday to Thursday. There's lots of reasons for it. But one of the common contributing factors is they're actually underdoing it. So their version of healthy eating, I quickly work it out and I'm like, you do realize you're massively undereating, and that's probably contributing to this sort of crazy binging cycle that you end up going on, binge diet cycle. So anyway, signs that you're undereating: lethargy, feeling tired, fatigue, irritability, like snappiness, being temperamental. That was a big one for me. That's when I know I'm hungry. That's a big one for me even to this day. It's very bodily, so you get frequent hunger pangs, you get the growling of the stomach. You can feel it, right, as opposed to a mental hunger, which is elsewhere. Rapid weight loss, obviously a sign that you're undereating. Hair loss. Brittle nails can be a sign that your calorie deficit is too aggressive. So hopefully some kind of telltale signs to look out for there. If you're nodding your head experiencing lots of those, I mean, there could be many different health conditions that are contributing to that list of symptoms. But if you're in a weight loss phase right now, if you're losing weight right now, it could be that you're pushing your calories too low. So hopefully take this as a sign that maybe you need to increase them and increase actually your portions, or at least your calories via the composition of your meals by adding more calorie dense foods. Make sense? Obviously, signs that you're overeating right now, despite eating very cleanly, is that you're not losing weight or you're actually gaining weight. Do something about this. Respect the fact that portions still and calories still matter regardless of you following a whole foods plant-based diet. Tip number 3 here, batch cooking. I'm a big batch cooker. I'm not a meal prep person. You will very rarely see me to this day get out little Tupperware containers and spoon things in and make, spend my Sunday afternoons prepping for the next 4 or 5 days, maybe the next week. That's not my style. And I've kind of joked about it in the past about how unrealistic that is for most people and how they don't really stick to it and how the food tastes. I'm not joking. The food tastes terrible after a while. Like if you leave it prepped in your fridge for ages without cooking it, it tastes awful. When you actually come to eat it, it doesn't feel fresh and tasty and delicious anymore. So that is my point. Now, I still think for some people, meal prepping is beneficial. So as much as it's not a preference for me and how I think it's a bit over the top and how really if your meals are simple enough, you don't need to do loads of meal prep. As much as I talk about that, there are still some people I come across for whom they have such a particular schedule that actually spending Sunday afternoons prepping their next 15 meals is beneficial, and then doing it again on Wednesday evenings, for example, is beneficial. There are some people that they consistently do that and it brings them fantastic results. Good. But I don't think that's most people. I don't think that's practical. I think it requires a lot of time and a lot of motivation for people to do that cooking. I think it's boring and repetitive with meals. And so what I've become a big advocate for over the years, instead of meal prep, is batch cooking. So when you go to make a dinner, when you go to make your lentil dal, for example, in the evening with some brown rice and a few green veggies on the side, then doubling or tripling the ingredients for the next couple of days or for your lunch the following day, right? So you're going to do that cooking anyway. This is not rocket science, right? This is not really a profound idea, but some people, this literally doesn't occur to them. So I have to mention it, even though it probably sounds so patronizingly obvious. But yeah, just double. You're making that effort to cook anyway. You're spending that time to cook anyway. Why not just double the ingredients, and then you've got Wednesday night, Thursday night, whatever it is taken care of. Soups and stews are great for batch cooking, but you can really do it with everything you're making, right? I have my clients that do my chickpea salad sandwiches, which is one of more popular lunch options on my program, I make several fillings worth, because the ingredients, you make several fillings worth, and then you still need to go and assemble the sandwich from the filling every morning to take it to work or school, right? But at least the filling's ready to go. So you can batch cook quite a lot. I've even had clients batch cook oatmeal on my program, which I don't personally like. I would prefer to cook it from fresh every day because it doesn't take too long anyway. But some clients, they feel that's really convenient and more efficient for them. So that's why I've become a big advocate of batch cooking, but not too much meal prep. I don't feel it's realistic. And by doing just a little bit of batch cooking, you're thinking ahead. It's a bit of damage control. You know that when you come home from work, maybe you had to stay at work 30 minutes later that day, maybe it was pretty stressful, maybe you had an argument with your boss or a customer that day, you're coming home, you know, you've got all these habits from old where in those circumstances, you usually turn to pizza or you pick something McDonald's up on the way home. You've just got your lentil dal, your lentil marinara, your shepherd's pie, your rice and beans already ready to go in the fridge. You just need to heat them up in the microwave, maybe add a couple of veggies and a few sauces, herbs and spices. And rather than doing 30 minutes of meal preparation, it's ready in 5 minutes time. The advantage of thinking ahead and doing a bit of batch cooking is obvious. I don't need to sell you on it, but it is really tied, I think, to a lot of people's consistency. So a little bit of batch cooking can save you in those tricky situations. Step number 4, I still want you to include some healthy fats. A lot of messaging in this community about, these more fat-rich plant foods. They ought to be avoided altogether, both in terms of internal health and well-being, but also in terms of weight loss because of the calories they contribute. I don't agree entirely with the total exclusion for most people of all fat-rich plant foods like nuts and seeds and tahini and avocados and olives and tofu, etc. I don't agree with that, actually. I don't. I think, yes, I agree they are high in calories. I don't think fat-rich plant foods have the same effect in the body as and therefore associated risk factors for major chronic disease as the likes of, animal fats, for example, or fats from heavily refined processed junk foods. I don't think it's anywhere nearly the same, and the studies on this, I think, are really compelling. There are lots of plant-based doctors that argue this as well. This is not me being particularly counterculture, but I think there are corners, let's say, of the plant-based community that are very dogmatic, needlessly dogmatic on this fat issue. And I just want to make a clear distinction with the effect that plant fats have in your body is very different to the very saturated fat, heavy animal fats and processed food fats. That aside, they also still provide, really essential nutrients. Think of the omegas, and they help you feel satisfied. There's a lot of folks that have come from a starch solution background to my program, and just adding a little bit of fat in their diet, I've actually been able to help the client eat less food, but feel more satisfied whilst adding a bit of fat to their diet. So this is very anecdotal, but this is something I've done time and time again. This is not just one client I've worked with over 3 or 4 years. I have seen this again with tens, maybe 50 odd clients over the years that have come to me from a starch solution background, still struggling with kind of the overeating on the starch solution, so not losing weight. And I'm just like, what are you eating? And the portions are absurd because they're going back for seconds, as long as it conforms to the sort of the check boxes of starch-based principles. The principles of starch-based eating, they're sort of justifying eating as much as they want. And I'm like, right, we'll cut them down. We'll be a bit more precise. Here's how much rice, potato, beans you're going to have, etc., etc. We're also going to add this little bit of fat. And at first they're like, whoa, I didn't think I could do this. And then 1 week in, when they're losing weight and actually feeling better for it, feeling more satisfied, eating less volume because they've got a more sort of macronutrient diverse, more nutrient diverse bowl of food. And therefore there's a sort of the nourishment factor goes up. The perception, but also the physical nourishment factor goes up because they're getting more diverse array of both macro and micronutrients. Then it's like, whoa, okay, all right, I actually get more satisfaction from having a little bit of fat in the diet. And I know it's controlled. It's not over the top. Ryan's told me, of course, if you're not a client of mine, you don't get this advantage of the personalization, but Ryan's told me that this is the right amount of a fat-rich plant food. This is the right amount of avocado for me at this meal. Ryan has vetted it. He's approved it. And then you can take confidence when you actually see that scale drop and you're eating avocado toast every day. Like, again, I've got a couple of clients that have avocado toast 5 times out of every week for breakfast. And again, the first couple of times they do this, the apprehension is massive because of what they've heard unfairly, I think, about fats in the plant-based sphere. So yes, there's still some debate about this. My stance on this, I have been unwavering on this for years now. My stance is, I agree that a low-fat plant-based diet is the way to go. And I still have my clients follow a low-fat diet. I still follow a low-fat diet, but it's not an ultra-low-fat diet. It's not one whereby less than 10% of calories are coming from fats. It's more like 15 to 20%. And there's a slight difference with what I do with my male and female clients on this. And then there are intricacies based on the individual. There are some exceptions to the rule. And I still have clients take, for the record, an omega-3 DHA EPA supplement, even though they have some sources of omega-3 anyway. I still do that as an insurance policy. I do not, bottom line, believe in the total exclusion of plant foods, of fat-rich plant foods like nuts, seeds, avocados. I think you just can't eat them, obviously, as liberally as you would like fruits and vegetables, which have a much lower caloric density. So on one hand, I'm saying be careful with the more fat-rich plant foods. On the other hand, I'm saying don't be so wary, so cautious, so careful of fat-rich plant foods that you avoid them altogether and the wonderful benefits they can bring in terms of nutrient profile and also, like I argued earlier, satiation. Hormonally as well, I forgot to mention. Number 5, incorporate plant-based protein. This is another one. Like we're in a community that really has debunked, rightly so, some of the absurd misconceptions there are in the mainstream health and weight loss world about carbohydrates, and I'm entirely grateful for that. But we shouldn't be so carb focused that we don't acknowledge the role of the other 2 macronutrients. We've just spoken about fat, and that's important, but protein by extension too. Okay, each of these 3 macronutrients plays a different but still integral role in the body, and that doesn't mean you need the same quantity of each 3 of them in your diet, but they still play a role. So the total exclusion of any one of them, I think, is absurd. But on protein very specifically, I like to include in my own diet, and certainly with my clients, a variety of plant-based protein sources such as beans, lentils, tofu, edamame, quinoa for a grain is high in protein. I wouldn't necessarily call it an overt protein source, but it's high in protein. Hemp seeds and other seeds too. Some nuts have a little bit of protein as well, not a huge amount, but some. Seitan is a great source of protein as well. In fact, an underrated one, a really lean source of protein because it contains very low fat. TVP, I'm not a massive fan of, but it is a wonderful way to get lots of protein in your diet without many fats. Yeah, I think that's probably all I have to say on that. I like to include one of these more overt protein sources in 2 to 3 out of my meals. I have 3 square meals a day, and certainly in at least 2 of them, maybe even the 3rd, I'm having one of these protein sources. So I still agree, for the record, with the high carbohydrate diet, but as somebody that does a little bit of resistance training, I don't want to be a bodybuilder. It's probably evident from my physique. And I do like going to the gym, but I wouldn't consider myself a gym rat. I'm in there about 3 times a week, lifting some weights and doing some body weight movements. As somebody with that in mind, as somebody that sees value in being strong as well as being cardiovascularly fit, as somebody that cares about things like bone density and maintaining a decent level of strength as I age. I might be premature in thinking about that. I don't think you're ever too premature in thinking about that. With half a mind on that, I'm a big proponent of resistance training. And even if you're not doing resistance training, protein would still be important. But particularly emphasize with those folks, breastfeeders as well. There's an argument there that they should have more than a moderately increased protein intake from those that aren't, for example, breastfeeding. So generally, I think, obviously protein is important. That's a very obvious statement for muscle and tissue growth and repair. This, not rocket science. Yes, generally, I would say, actually, I was going to say in some corners of the mainstream health world, but actually, it's a lot of it. Generally, in the mainstream health and weight loss world, is protein maybe slightly overrated for the average individual? Yes, that is something I've staunchly argued, and I still haven't changed my opinion on. Yes, I believe that's correct. I believe that's a fair assessment that most people overemphasize it to their detriment. But simultaneously, the solution to that is not to never talk about protein and to totally disregard it. And we can't be so critical of that overemphasis of protein that we neglect talking enough about the good that protein does, right? That's not the appropriate response. So I'm careful not to just give a completely opposite message to try and be contrarian against the overemphasis of protein and say, never worry about protein, because that's not my view. Yes, it's overemphasized, but the solution to that is not to never think about protein, obviously. So I like to have it in, let's say, at least 2 of my meals, and that's what I'll have my clients do as well. So yeah, we don't want to abandon any semblance of plant protein, exactly the same as with the fat. Step number 6, watch out for those invisible calories. I've talked about this recently on Instagram. There was a video I made earlier this year where I talked about it on YouTube. So again, maybe not something I need to cover all that much, but the Starbucks lattes and condiments and sauces and dressings and beverages, it's very, very easy to add 100, 150, 200 calories to your daily diet like that in just a couple of sips of things or a couple of little sprinklings of a certain dressing. So just be careful with this. This is not to say that you can't drink calories. This is not to say that you can't have condiments and you can't use, jarred sauces sometimes, or soy sauce, or coconut aminos, or pre-bought salad dressings, some of which are very clean, or your own homemade salad dressings. This is not me saying you can't do those things. This is not me saying you can't go and have a Starbucks as long as it's a relatively healthy one. This is not me saying that. More, I just want to sort of implant in your mind just maybe perhaps a little bit more mindfulness, if it's not already there, about how these things still contribute to your overall calorie intake. Okay, I know they don't feel like food. I know the chewing process isn't necessarily the same, but there are a lot of things that contain these kind of hidden invisible calories that we don't necessarily think about. That little bit of jam, jelly for my friends across the pond that we have on that slice of toast, that might well have a few more calories than you currently think. So just be a little bit careful with this one. It's worth turning over that nutrition label and doing a bit of math and thinking, whoa, okay, I didn't know 100 calories a day were coming from just this thing. Because, there are still things that might surprise you. Sometimes you'll turn a jar over and you'll be like, for example, I found a salad dressing here the other day that actually had a tiny amount of rapeseed oil in. And it was an amount of rapeseed oil that I find forgivable. And I wouldn't be using it every day anyway as a salad dressing for the moments where I didn't want to prepare one. I was in a rush and I don't want to prepare one of my own. So I picked it up and I thought, this is good. This is vegan. It's got a little bit of oil in, but generally it's an extremely low fat dressing. The rest of the ingredients are pretty decent. They're not amazing, but they're pretty decent. For me, this is passable to use every now and again as a backup plan. It's not the tastiest thing in the world, but as a backup plan, it's very, very convenient for me. So I'll pick this up. And I was surprised. It's 9 calories per tablespoon. 9 calories per tablespoon. That's astonishingly good for a salad dressing, albeit a more vinaigrette-based dressing. That's still astonishingly good. Vinaigrette-based dressings tend to be much lower than something that's made from like tahini or nuts. That's why I'm saying astonishingly, surprisingly good. But 9 calories, that's really, really decent. So, it might go both ways, and maybe you are factoring in, the plant milks, for example, that you pour on your oats and your cereals. So maybe you're one step ahead of me on this, but just be wary of it. If you're not right now, think about your daily diet and think about how many little things are sneaking in there that you're not actually factoring in. You don't really count it as a contribution towards your daily nutrition. But actually, those things, those habits, when you add them up, they might be contributing 500 calories to your daily diet without you necessarily knowing it. And that doesn't mean you need to stop those things, but it might be the explanation of why you're not losing weight right now. And either those hidden calories, those condiments, those beverages might need to be reduced, or the rest of your diet might need to be reduced to make way for those things more so because you enjoy doing those things. Make sense? Number 7, obvious, focus on whole foods. Goodness me, what a shocker. How often do I talk about this? It's hardly profound, so we'll spend less than 20 seconds on it. Emphasize fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, so beans, peas, lentils, nuts and seeds. These are foods that are nutrient dense and they're lower in calories compared to many processed junk foods or the vegan junk products, or lots, I should say, of the vegan junk products. Yes, nuts and seeds have higher calories, but generally these are very low calorie foods. So we're focusing on the whole foods that contain really good nutrition and a really good satiating effect. Have you ever just binged on some junk food and you're physically full and feel quite terrible, but you're kind of still a bit hungry? You're not actually truly satisfied. Well, in many cases, there's a few contributing factors to this affair. There's a few variables happening psychologically here and physiologically. But one of the contributing factors is you haven't actually eaten anything with nutritional value. So your body's like, all right, you're just giving me a load of food volume, but what the heck is this? Right? What have you just given me? There's no value, there's no nourishment in this whatsoever. And it will quickly recognize that as you're metabolizing and digesting that food. So I forget my original point on this, but even weight loss aside for a moment, this is another point. Even weight loss aside, obviously it's best to stick to whole foods because you get all this great nutrition. And I think, to be fair, there are some processed foods that are still okay and weight loss friendly. And I've spoken about this in recent live streams and everywhere. And you guys see me have the breads and the pastas and the cereals. But I'm pretty selective about which breads and which pastas and cereals I have, right? You're not going to have me see the children's cereals that are filled with little chocolate and loads of refined sugar and that sort of thing. And you're not going to see me have white flour bread that's oil and eggs, obviously, that's probably obvious, but like sugar and loads of oil in. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to look for the lower calorie density, higher fiber options, the cleaner options. With pastas, I'm going to use whole wheat, lentil, or maybe pea pasta. I'm enjoying green pea pasta, as odd as that sounds. I'm quite enjoying that right now. So you're going to see me do those things. So processed foods can still be healthy and weight loss friendly. If you're in a calorie deficit every day, you're going to lose weight anyway. Doesn't really matter. But still best, obviously, to do with the more cleaner options. And so this brings me on nicely to step 8, which is obviously limit processed foods. So I just talked about, focusing on whole foods, limiting processed foods with the exception of the couple I've mentioned. But, for me, the red flags are like the vegan snacks and chocolates and refined grains like white pasta, sugary drinks, for example. These are often high in calories, high in fats, messed around with additives, chemicals, extra thrown in there that throw you off, that really, they're no good for you, right? Forget calories, like some of the additives and chemicals they throw in food. It's just awful now. And I appreciate GMO. You can still get clean food that's GMO and it's not as, it's got problems and there's pesticides. I know this. I can see the double standard and the hypocrisy in this. But it's still clearly miles better than, those really heavily processed, messed around with junk foods. So what I often say to my clients is, look, you'll get away with this once in a while. If every now and again you have a vegan burger or a bit of vegan ice cream, I do that. That's fine. It's a drop in the bucket of your overall diet. But if you're making it a regular habit, you're in trouble because not only are you adding all these calories to your diet, you're still going to be hooked on the junk food because it's entering your system too often for you to forget, and it stays on that sort of pedestal in your mind. Step number 9, so limit processed foods, obvious. Step number 9, another obvious one, fiber. Fiber-rich foods like vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, they help you feel fuller for longer, which is one of fiber's functions. So therefore reducing overeating and helping you better control. It's not a guarantee, but helping you better control your calorie intake. And fiber is a huge part of my criteria when I sit down and design a client's meal plans. Fiber is something I think about an awful lot. I think there's a lot of people from a starch solution background that aren't having the beans and they don't have that many vegetables and they're sort of just throwing together these plates of potatoes or rice and maybe some vegetables, admittedly. But I don't think it's that varied. And like I say, you don't have the beans there and you don't have a little bit of healthy fat. And so I think people are missing the value of things like beans and lentils. And I cram these into my plan, like I said earlier on, into my meal plans, like I said earlier on, for myself and for my clients. Of course, there can sometimes be digestive discomfort for beans and lentils and whatnot, but that's all stuff that can be troubleshooting. But beans and lentils are so filling largely because of their fiber content, but there's a whole other slew of foods that have a lot of fiber in them. And I think, cram these on your plate and, you're going to be good to go because you're going to be able to eat few calories because lots of fiber-rich foods have very low calories anyway, with nuts and seeds being an obvious exception to that. But most fiber-rich foods have very low calories anyway. So not only are you getting low calories from the foods that contain fiber, but also then very directly from the fiber itself, you're getting so much fullness because of what fiber does in helping you feel fuller for longer that it's just incredible. And then there are other, I would say that's the obvious advantage of having a high fiber diet from a weight loss perspective. But then there's also the benefit that fiber has on gut bacteria, which has been proven to play an important role in weight loss efforts. Inflammation as well, which research suggests is increasingly linked to obesity. So there's lots happening there that goes beyond fiber helping you feel full. I think that's the obvious benefit to having lots of fibrous foods in your diet from a weight loss perspective, but there are other things happening to do there with the gut bacteria and inflammation. And then again, let's freaking forget the scales for a second, even though that's what we're talking about here, even though weight loss coaching obviously is my thing, it's my domain. just for your general health and well-being, a high fiber diet. The data, I looked at the data a couple of years ago, and I'm sure it hasn't changed. If anything, it will have got worse. I could put money on that. But data for the US and the UK, and actually, I think it was Canada, I was looking at studies from as well, on the statistics for fiber consumption and the amount of sort of fiber the average American, Canadian, Brit was consuming per day. Shockingly low. It was appallingly bad in the US, actually. The UK was bad enough, but it was appallingly bad in the US. So yeah, fiber. Good thing is, fiber is not hard to come by on a whole foods plant-based diet. It's not. But if you do happen to be watching this as somebody else with a slightly different nutrition philosophy, I'm not going to judge you for it. I'm not going to be condescending about it. I found the approach that has changed my life so much, as is the case for the vast majority of my audience. So I'm not going to be condescending about it. But I would really encourage you, if I'm in a position to give advice, to get some fiber in your diet. If you're doing something keto-y or something carnivore-y, you can imagine what I think about those things, but I'm not going to be patronizing about it. But please get some fiber into your diet. You'll be so much better off for it, I argue. What are we on now? 10? Step 10, I think, stay physically active. Combine that plant-based diet with a regular exercise routine. Engage in activities you enjoy, such as brisk walking, cycling, swimming, dancing, tennis, which I'll be playing tomorrow morning at the crack of dawn on a Saturday. That's how I spend my Saturday mornings. And you know what? I love it. It takes a bit of motivation sometimes. I'm like, why do I do this? But I get there, I play some tennis, I have a laugh, I don't take it too seriously. I like the people that I play tennis with. It's a good group. It's a good vibe. It's all good. It's fine. And it's, not only then do I get the physical activity, but it's fun. I enjoy it as well. So that makes me want to go back again, right? That allows consistency. If you don't actually enjoy the exercise you're doing, there's kind of a question of, well, how long is this really going to last before I eventually find excuses to not continue going back? Physical activity supports weight loss and overall health and well-being. Obvious, the endorphin boost, the neurotransmitter. Increasingly, I'm talking with my clients about how they're feeding back to me how wonderful they feel when they actually throw themselves into the slow go cardio training protocol that I have them follow alongside my meal planning system. And just it really is so obvious that exercise is good for you from a physical perspective. But I think people bluntly that are out of shape from an exercise perspective, I think generally they really forget how potent a medicine exercise is for the brain and for mental health and well-being and clarity and focus as well. We start very gently with my clients, so maybe that's best for you. If you are out of shape, admittedly, and it's been a while since you've done any rigorous exercise, just start with walking, 20 minutes walking a day. It's an easy, gentle way to get started with a low risk of injury. It's very accessible because you can just go outside and walk, I should hope, right? I do up the ante with my clients as the program goes on. We do a bit of resistance training. We get them doing sort of run intervals, which for some clients, that's like the prospect of them doing that is just wild. But by the time they actually have to do it in month 3, they've already built up to it. So it's very natural at that point. But initially they're like, that's really going to be me, Ryan. I'm not sure about that. But I've got this philosophy of sort of building up gradually and slowly in time, and that makes it easier. In terms of weight loss, it just makes it easier, I argue. It makes it easier to maintain a calorie deficit, eat a good amount of food if you're doing a bit of exercise, and you get not only the calorie burn from the exercise, but the improvement to metabolic rate. And then, as I say, all the other benefits that come with doing exercise beyond just the number on the scale. So even though it's possible to literally lose weight doing no exercise, so long as you're in a calorie deficit, I don't think that's best. I don't think that's efficient. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's healthful. It's not my advice. So stay physically active, and it's a great supplement. You hear this kind of statement of it's all about the nutrition. It's not all about the nutrition. It's not all about the nutrition. As a sentiment, as a soundbite, I understand why people say that. It's largely about the nutrition, but it's certainly not literally true that it's all about the nutrition, because exercise can still contribute quite nicely to one's weight loss efforts. Tip number 11, this is our final one. This is the first one that isn't really a practical sort of nutrition step or exercise step. This is more of a mentality that I think people are well off adopting anyway. They're better off adopting. Be okay with feeling slightly isolated, slightly lonely almost. This is going to sound really depressing in your weight loss journey. And that's the reality of it. For most of us, losing weight is a lonely experience because there's no one else that really gets it. Or, well, people get it. People understand the motivations behind you wanting to lose weight. Lots of people more. Lots of people around you have tried to lose weight or have successfully or unsuccessfully lost weight for periods of time. People understand the draw to losing weight, but when you actually go and do it, you realize how few people are interested in actually living a particularly healthy lifestyle in the Western world. Depends where you are, but I'm generally speaking on behalf, I suppose, of most places in the Western world. This is my story anyway. This is my experience, doing traveling, but also interacting with you guys that live in various places. But then you can take it one step further. So not only is actually saying no to pizza night kind of a slightly counterculture thing, perhaps in your social circle, but then saying no to pizza night whilst also saying no to meat and dairy and being one of these hippie vegans, not my words, but that's people's story. Well, that's even more niche, isn't it? That's even more bizarre. That's even more unheard of. And I work with clients in I've never liked this term, I've always found it incredibly patronizing, but the flyover states, right, in the US. The states where veganism is typically not well known or well understood, where plant-based eating options are few and far between. I work with clients all over. I've had clients from Louisiana. I've had clients from Mississippi. I've had clients from Georgia over the years. I've had clients from the Carolinas, right? These very sort of hush puppies, meat, steak, ribs, right? States, culturally, food-wise. And believe it or not, I've had clients from those places and very regularly. And they do feel alone. And they do genuinely have people that don't know what veganism is around them. I didn't know what veganism was, but this is 10 years ago, to be fair. But I didn't know what it was when I first started eating wild plant foods. Obviously, I knew the term, but I didn't technically know the difference between vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian. I didn't know all the definition. I didn't know the ins and outs of it. So we have to be, respectful to people's beliefs and their other stories and the way they were raised and the culture that they've grown in. We have to understand that they're a product of that and be forgiving when people don't kind of understand or immediately support what we're doing. That would be kind of entitled to assume that everyone would be a cheerleader for us. But the reality of it is that kind of you will be on your own with this, and there ain't going to be that many people cheering you on or celebrating you. And you can either moan about that, or you can just say, oh, well, that's that then. I'm on my own. Okay, I'm going to do it regardless. And I think that's obviously that's the only choice. If you're serious about this, that's the only choice. You're going to have to swallow it and get over the fact that there's not going to be that many people that gets it. And buckle up, because you might get some criticism. You might not get as much support or understanding as you like. And you might even get some, like I say, some criticism, because this shines a light on people's insecurities about their own health. When they see you losing weight, they might get a bit sort of defensive. Oh, you don't need to do that, because of how they're sort of projecting onto you. It's not really about you, but how they're projecting onto you. They might not kind of get it. They might think that, oh, you're one of these preachy vegans now. Even if you don't say anything, that might be their story of what vegans are. So they might put that onto you, even if you're not technically vegan, but you just want to move in a plant-based direction. They might start putting these sorts of stories, insecurities onto you. They might no, I think that's it. I think I'll go around in circles if I stick on this one too much. My clients don't get it too badly overall, but I have worked with people that their partner literally for months doesn't get it and is still sat around that dinner table saying, but why are you doing this? Like, but what about this? What about that? What about this? And it doesn't matter. And they are just and there's a difference between, asking questions and being unreasonable, obviously. So my example is not that much of a good one, but I've had clients in the past that their partners or loved ones simply will still try to give them meat, and they will still try to give them things. Oh, have this glass of milk. They will literally put it in front of them and say, you should do this. Oh yeah. And then they'll say, oh, but I thought it was vegan. Oh, anyway, I could go on and on. I'm just going to, but I remember once there was someone, an old friend of mine, who for months, eggs, like either they had the worst memory in the world, which I don't believe to be true, or they just thought it was funny to sort of poke the bear. I think it's more that one, knowing the kind of person that they were. Still an old friend of mine. Not someone I've fallen out with, but someone that I'm not as in contact as I was with at this period of my life. And for 3 months, this egg issue would come up maybe every week or two. They'd be like, oh, so can you eat eggs? And I said, no, I don't eat eggs, no. Yeah, no, I don't wish to eat eggs. No, I'm not going to eat eggs. 2 weeks later. So what about eggs then? 3 weeks later, offering me something with eggs, right? It would constantly come up. People are just, they're stubborn on it and they're forgetful and they don't mean to be, or they're just not that interested. They don't really get it. It doesn't really click for them like it does for us. And that's fine. We can't feel expectant of that. It's actually quite arrogant to feel quite expectant of that. Anyway, that's my point. I'm going around in circles. You might need to feel okay with being on your own. And that sucks. And it feels kind of disempowering because it's like, there's no team effort here. Nobody wants to get healthy with me. But like, what is your alternative, right? You can't use that as an excuse not to try or to just give up. Oh, I'm going to eat pizza because no one cares anyway, right? And they're going to keep offering it to me. No, you have to be resilient. You have to double down and you have to go, wow, the culture around me is so unhealthy. They've actually got a problem with me doing what I'm doing. They actually don't support me that much for doing what I'm doing. That's even more reason for me to do this and help sort of maybe perhaps change their minds and open them up to making better, healthier choices because they're in a bad way themselves. So I'll be doing them a favor, but also for my sake, just being awakened to just how bad people's habits are, that when I say I want to eat more vegetables, when I say I don't want to drink as much booze, when I say I'm coming out to eat, but I'm just going to grab a salad, guys, they all go crazy. Well, that reaction suggests to me that there's something seriously wrong here. So I've got to fix this. I've got to double down. I think that's the mentality to have. But yeah, you are going to have to accept that this journey is going to be quite isolating. It's easier if you've got me as your coach, and it's easier if there's other people around you that get it. But even then, you're still the person that has to go home and make a healthy meal 3 times a day, right? And make good exercise choices a couple of times a week. You're still the only person that can make that decision. You can get some accountability, you can get a few cheerleaders from afar, but you're the person that actually has to action this day in, day out. You can have somebody that's really health conscious at home, but you can still go home and eat cookies. You can still grab McDonald's every time you leave the house. It is you that decide what goes in here. So you have to kind of make your peace with that, yeah, it's kind of me against the world. Not me against the world. You might have some external battles, like I'm saying, you might get some criticism, but it's more so you against your own habits. And that external criticism can sort of help enable those bad habits. You have enablers around you that really force things onto you, push things onto you. But you have to develop that kind of resilience. Like, no, I know why I'm doing this. I'm doing this for me. I want these results. It's that kind of unwavering sort of self-trust and confidence that, no, I'm going to do this. There's my North Star. I want to lose 30 pounds. I'm going to do this, or I want to run that marathon one day. So I'm going to do this. This is exactly why I'm doing it. And just focus on that. And I think some people, they cave very easily to like societal pressure, or somebody else that keeps making comments about their diet, or somebody that's a big believer in keto and they keep going about keto, and they kind of start rubbing off on you and you end up eating keto meals with it. Like, if you know this is what you want to do, you need to be kind of unwavering and apologetic about it. So yeah, it's kind of slightly depressing sounding advice, but you need to be okay with being on your own. There's a lot of people that they don't have any friends that get this. And that will change as this gets more popular, as this methodology, this nutrition philosophy gets more popular. But in the meantime, you might have no mates that do this and never will understand. So yeah, don't expect people to get it. And I think the reframe here is it's kind of arrogant and it's kind of entitled to think that people will automatically understand it. You just need to be like this, tunnel vision. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And here's the great thing as well with this, because I'm making it sound so bad, aren't I? So depressing. But the good thing with this is, I think the best way to communicate what a powerful nutrition approach this is with silently leading by example. And that's just somebody who is paid to talk about this. And I'm still saying that silently leading by example is the thing that opens it up. That's the thing that makes people go, damn, you're looking good, Rye. What have you been eating? What have you been doing? Really? You got in shape like that? Eating tofu? What? You can build muscle doing it. That is what. It's that through the result. It's not you talking about it, let's be realistic about this. Put yourself in somebody else's shoes. You're starting a plant-based diet and you've got 60 pounds you're trying to lose. You've been overweight for years. Let me be really frank and blunt and slightly offensive about this. Swap the roles, right? Somebody who is 60 pounds overweight is trying to tell you that you should follow a plant-based diet. They're following up. This is assuming they're preaching, but they're going to follow a plant-based diet. They're 60 pounds overweight. They're getting no health results. And you've never been exposed to plant-based diets. You don't get it. You've got all the B12 protein, calcium questions in your head. Of course you're going to laugh at them. Of course you're going to go, yeah, you don't, that's ridiculous. Don't do that, blah, blah, blah. No, you should do the X, Y, and Z. Of course you are. But when that person has lost 30 pounds of the 60 pounds, or even better, 60 pounds, that's when the script gets flipped. That's when the person starts coming to you and being like, I've got numerous examples of this. There's people I'm thinking of in my head, but that's when the script gets flipped and they're like, whoa, okay. Yeah, all right. What have you been doing? What are you like? Okay, so what do you get for this? You need to lead by example. So don't preach about it. Don't try and make people understand you. Get the results, and then you have an authority and a credibility with people when you speak on these subjects. And when they see what you're eating, they're going to be way more receptive to it if you're somebody that's in good shape. Now, is that really fair? Maybe not. Maybe it isn't fair. Maybe it isn't a sign of a good argument about good nutrition. What shape the person is isn't necessarily indicative of the quality of their argument about good nutrition. Maybe that isn't fair. Maybe that does seem harsh. But it's the reality of influence, or it's the reality of influence as I've explored it, as I've witnessed it. If I was 40 pounds overweight talking about plant-based diet online, do you think my Instagram and YouTube, and not that I'm massively successful, but do you think my coaching program would be as popular as it is? Do you think I'd be able to do this stuff full time? Of course not. Of course not. You have to walk the talk, and people look at you and they go, whoa. So leading by example. Anyway, I didn't mean to spend so long on this, but that's the antidote. That isolation, that loneliness we feel, just channel all of that frustration into just, I'm going to show the world. I'm going to show it to myself. Look, primarily you're doing this for you, but so I don't want to make it about some chip on the shoulder. Oh, I've got to prove this to other people. No, it's primarily about you. Obviously, that's why you're doing this. But a nice little side benefit being, I look forward to people asking me, like, what am I eating? And maybe being more curious about plant-based nutrition once I've shown them what it can actually do through my results. Anyway, that's enough on that. There's comments. Oh, lovely T is here. Hey, T, how are you? Mathoni says, you're right. They even make fun when they see one eating healthy. Yeah, well, that's how counterculture and against the grain it is. My only friend that gets it lives 4,800 miles away from me. I wonder who that might be, T. Who are you referring to there? Anyone I know? Yeah, like that's the point, isn't it? Gets it. Like, we don't need somebody to necessarily eat how we're eating and be as passionate or as enthusiastic. That would be ideal. Like if our spouse or our best friend or person we spend a lot of time with, that'd be ideal if they were as passionate about plant-based nutrition as us. Obviously, that would be the best case scenario. But people don't even need that. As a human need, you just need to feel understood, I think. That's been my theory on this, talking to people about their social groups when they raise this subject. People just need to be understood. People just need to have a spouse around them that maybe they don't do it themselves, but they're really respectful and they're understanding. Hey, I can see this is improving you. Good for you. I personally, I'm not there yet. I will have some of the stuff you're eating, but I'm not there yet. But I've seen what it's doing to you, and I've got to accept that this is something really quite powerful and it's really working for you. So good for you. That's all we need. We just need to be understood a little bit. People don't need much encouragement. They just need a little pat on their back. Wow, they really do. So yeah, we just need people to, do we need people to do exactly what we're doing? No. Do we need people to get it? Yeah, to a degree. It's just more about being understood. I think people don't feel that. Mathoni says that's true. They will follow and get curious. Yeah, that's it. Leading by example. Okay, folks. Hopefully this was all useful. We're an hour in, so we'll wrap up here. But yeah, if you're just joining live right now, go back and watch the start of the stream. We shared 10, 11, 12 tips there, hacks to get the scale moving on a plant-based diet. Hopefully this was all useful. As always, if you want some more coaching and support from me, the link will be down below, veganslimandsustain.com. Okay, we'll finish here. Take care, everyone. Bye.